The African continent is no doubt the most resource-abundant continent. Almost every country in Africa has a deposit of natural resources. Resources such as gold, diamond, oil, natural gas, copper, uranium, among others are mined in different parts of the continent. The continent is endowed with about 97% of the world's chromium, 90% of the world's cobalt, 85% of the world's platinum, 70% of the world's cocoa, and 60% of the world's coffee. Most African countries such as Nigeria, Congo, Niger, Ghana, etc. have huge deposits of natural resources. The video examines the phenomenon of the natural resource curse in Africa. Understanding the reason why a natural resource-rich continent like Africa is still grappling with extreme poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment is key to policymakers and researchers.
What's more depressing is that the continent is blessed with the rarest minerals like diamonds. Still more than 300 million Africans are living in extreme conditions with daily wage less than $1.90. What is the average salary in Africa? The average monthly salary in Africa is approximately $758 dollars, and the average annual salary is around $9,096 dollars, according to exchange rates in March 2022. Lot of people will ask themselves, is this even real because they do not earn this number? Yes, unfortunately is correct. All this could be consequence due to corrupted reports made by official government, where reports are done just to satisfy international measures. The natural resource curse exists in Africa. Natural resource abundance was found to have no significant effect on economic growth in Africa. Low quality of institutions and governance is the major obstacle so they can benefit from their wealth. Although the results indicate that natural resources wealth can help in lowering poverty, it has no impact on people's well-being in terms of education and health care. Throughout African history, external powers have taken land and interfered in the continent's affairs. This peaked with the takeover of almost all of Africa by European powers from the 1880s. Since decolonialization from the 1950s onwards, Africa has mostly failed to develop. Although the poor management of most African countries following independence also hampered Africa's development, the impact of European colonialism is on the biggest reasons that Africa is not developed. Colonialism in Africa resulted in countries across the continent failing to develop diverse and dynamic economies. Upon independence, African economies were heavily reliant on resource extraction and they have struggled to move away from this. The limited range of many African economies due to colonialism is a major reason why they are not developed. Arguably, the world's poorest continent lags because of modern-age colonialism, which severely affects its economic growth and development. In simple words, colonialism is described as an act of practicing full or partial control over another country. The primary purpose is to exercise power and exploit the natural resources of the country so that it cannot grow economically. This is precisely the case with Africa. The continent has abundant natural resources, including the most precious diamonds, but most Africans are still under the tight control of powerful nations such as United States, China, United Kingdom, France, Netherlands, Portugal, Germany, Arabic nations, etc. For example, the policies of colonialism forced Africa to rely on imported goods as all the natural resources are drawn away by the wealthy nations. Africa is enormous. It is second largest inhabited continent and if united would be the biggest country in the world. It is also relatively sparsely populated, with a total of 1.216 billion people. Huge expanses and large distances between communities makes development more difficult as people need better infrastructure and connectivity in order to thrive. This has made development in Africa more difficult. Another thing that caused African countries to struggle with development is the continent's terrain. From jungles to deserts, Africa's landscape makes modern development difficult. Infrastructure is hard to build, and nations struggle to become cohesive. Corruption is special leading factor dedicated to why Africa is lagging behind the rest of the world in innovating technology. Almost all African countries rank poorly on corruption perception indexes. A corrupt government leads to poor education, a poor healthcare system, poverty, the economic gap between classes of people, economic instability, malnutrition, non-existent security, etc., and all of this leads to nothing but deterioration of a nation. Individuals who are born in such societies or nations don't go to school since they are forced to learn a technical skill or forced to work in labor because of extreme poverty, and some even die before reaching adulthood because of malnutrition, suffering from diseases, and others going through violence. Those who escape from all of this unscratched, happen to find out about the bureaucracy that is in the hands of fat, corrupt industry players who are trying their best to prevent any bright, young mind from rising up and challenging them. They prevent any competition and block out bright young minds that would have done much more for the development of the nation and its economy, and usually we could refer that with their governmental leaders and all other politics, who are responsible to resolve this problem. Buying for power is one thing, but abusing your power is another. African leaders cling to power for too long, adversely affecting the economy. Many African leaders are at the forefront of creating instability in their respective countries. They do this through vote rigging, bribing voters, and other unfair means of winning an election. These leaders use public funds for their gain and impoverish their people. For example, poor people rely heavily on public services, but they are more likely to be met by demands for bribes for obtaining support. A critical factor that needs immediate attention is the lack of transparency. Official reports revealed that diamond production in overall Africa is twice as large as projected. The reason: illegal trade, underreporting of production, corruption, and tax evasion. This examples included the former Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, who claimed that a $15 billion missing diamond revenue story was all lies. The quality of institutions is very important in the development of Africa. Outdated government policies are common in African countries. Several governance indicators are found to enhance economic growth in Africa. Good governance should be encouraged. State institutions and the entire structure should be strengthened. Corruption should be controlled and accountability and rule of law should be encouraged. This will make the governance system more efficient and supportive of economic growth and development in Africa, but sadly in Africa, the governments are not paying much heed to all of this. Where the whole world spends an average of 2.6% of their GDP on science and technological research and innovation, the African governments have invested way less than this, which has resulted in the African nations lagging behind the rest of the world. Many African nations are growing their foreign debt at a quick rate. Many African countries depend too much on loans to finance their projects. For example, many African governments have debt totaling $1 trillion to China, United States, etc. African nations are divided along colonial borders, making African unity a far-fetched dream. Africans could not work together for their mutual benefit. Instead, they depend on outside help from the United States, China, and European Union. The current state of African leadership is weak and unwilling to unite Africa into one strong continent that others can respect globally. Africans are still using manual labor to do mechanized jobs around the continent. One primary reason Africa will never develop is the lack of technological advancements in most African countries. Most African countries are making very little progress in technological advances. This makes Africa unattractive to investors who want to profit from their businesses. If Africans are not using advanced technology at home, why would an investor come to your country to start their business? Innovation is key to development. Firstly, Africa is generally lacking the organizations and businesses that push innovation, and this is reason why the continent is not developed. Science, technology, engineering, and research are all key to a nation progressing. In lots of markets in Nairobi or other capital cities around African continent could be seen how some of people are talented for doing innovations, but when other superpower countries see that, they simply steal the idea how to do it.